Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Uncorporate World. I'm your host, Dr. Heidi, and today I'm here with Diana and Ryan. We are going to be having a wonderful discussion and really looking forward to today's show. So, Ryan, welcome. Maybe you can just tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Dr. Heidi. It's good to be here. And a little bit about me. I spent a long time in the venture-backed startup world. Actually, when I was in high school was when I got my start in that world, often in big enterprise software, things that you don't really appreciate, but they're helping power your everyday lives. I did a little bit of a stint in medical device as well as a marketing company. So a little bit of all that. And then in 2021, had the opportunity after an exit event to kind of sit back and try to figure out what was most important in my life. And I looked at all the different things I'd been a part of and about 8 different companies in that time. And I really loved the idea of figuring out why we are the way we are and where we came from and how to lead better. My first company, I was a teenager. My dad had to co-sign all the legal documents because they wouldn't let a 14-year-old sign the
Really?
incorporation documents. And at the time, I was leading people that were as old as the silent generation, and since I've led all the way down to Gen Z and have taught Gen Alpha, so have Gen Alpha kids, so have quite a wide range of experiences, and that's what got me really focused on generations and looking at
Mm.
what makes us who we are and how do we navigate those changes in an ever changing society.
You want to start us off, Diana?
Sure. I heard you mention that you started your first company when you were 14, which I think it's really impressive. And what made you think differently at that age?
That's a really good question, and the answer is I don't know. I've always been entrepreneurial. I tried to. I had guinea pigs and turtles growing up. Dogs. I would charge people to pet them in what I called a petting zoo. I would try anything entrepreneurial. It started with selling hot chocolate. Grew up in Chicago, so selling hot chocolate on the street corner in colder months. And there's a great picture my parents have of me. I'm bundled up like at the edge of our garage. Hot chocolate 25 cents, which now with inflation would be about $25. But looking at all of that, it's just really always been a passion. And I think if I could zoom back and say, why did I do it? To answer your question, Diana, is because I love making the world a better place. And I have not always succeeded at that. I've learned through successes and learned far more through failures. But I think I've always wanted to make the world better. And, selling lemonade and hot chocolate wasn't exactly that, but things I did after that really was able to see the positive imprint.
That is really cool. Also, as an international student who's actually English is my second language. So what I've been like going through in like daily life, especially like here in America, is that like I struggle a lot when I was talking to adults because like I have this pressure because I'm using my second language that I'm also kind of like struggling with like self-confidence like when I speak. So I was wondering, how did you like overcome this like fear or like lack of like self-confidence, especially like when you have to like communicate with like adults when you're like 14?
That's another really good question and thoughtful question. I think that's not just isolated to you, and speaking in a second language, which is really impressive. And your English is I would have never known it was your second language. So that
Right.
kudos, really impressive. But I think what I had the opportunity to do, and I think we have this current generation, we've kind of taken this opportunity away from them. Is I was allowed to fail, and I failed a lot, a tremendous amount. And if you think about a baby learning to walk, we clap when they fall on their rear end.
Mhm.
And it's so funny because as human beings, we actually don't mind seeing stories of failure, especially when the person gets up and tries again. And I think that's what I had so many opportunities to do. I mean, my parents, if I wanted, we rarely went to McDonald's, but the few times that I did, I would get cash, cold hard cash, and my parents would make me go order at the counter when I was 6 or 7 years old, and talking to that adult, learning that interaction. If I wanted to buy something, I had to earn the money, which is part of what drove the entrepreneurial bone in my body, if you will. So I think a lot of that it is just experience, and I think the more and more technology gives us the ability to watch people experiencing things, we feel like we don't need the experience firsthand. And so streaming things on TikTok or YouTube, we're getting all of this real time information, and information is great, but information does not equal experience.
Yeah. Do you find, Ryan, that you're seeing this less and less with the current generation, that ability to be able to communicate with someone else, to really know how to hold that conversation, to be even able to just do trivial tasks like giving back change to somebody if you happen to pay by cash and not plastic these days.
Right.
I've been noticing people getting tripped up on these things, and some of my own students have been struggling with it. But I'm curious, where you're studying the different generations, what you've seen through your lens.
Absolutely. We're seeing a tremendous amount of struggle right now with Gen Z. And I want to say it's not Gen Z's fault. And Gen Alpha turned teenagers this year at the time of this recording. And we're seeing the same thing trickle down to Gen Alpha as well. And I don't want to blame the parents either.
Yeah.
But culture and society as a whole has allowed a generation to be raised with a little bit more, I call it bubble wrap.
Mhm.
And if you look, there's a term called fragility and anti-fragility. We all know what fragile is. If I take a glass mug and I drop it right now, it's most likely going to shatter. However, if you look at the immune system in our bodies, that's anti-fragile. When we get sick, theoretically, if our bodies are working the way they should, our body should be able to fight that same disease off if we get it again in the next couple of weeks or couple of years, depending on the how long that stays in our body. That's anti-fragile. So sometimes something bad makes us stronger. However, what we've done as a society, and technology has definitely not helped this, but it's enabled it, is we have allowed a generation to not have some of those failure points, and so they have become a little bit more fragile. And that's not a intended as an insult, but just when you're looking at fragility or anti-fragility, they haven't had the opportunity to get back up again because they're always picked up and put back together. And that's something that we've seen across the generation. And the danger of talking about generations is we're labeling, and they're general, and it is not it does not apply to every single person and every single person's experience. But as a whole, when you're looking at culture and society, we have allowed a whole generation to not have to go up to the counter and order, not
Mhm.
have to look an adult in the eye, and all of this. And a lot of it's just because we didn't know the dangers of some of the things we were allowing our kids to have access to, and it shaped a whole generation.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been seeing is, as I've been working with high school students applying for college and then going on and trying to get full-time employment, there seems to be a big gap or misunderstanding between the generations, what motivating the different generations. And some of the things that I'm hearing is, fear of hiring individuals because they're seen, and I'm going to just put the term out there. I'm
Mhm.
not trying to label it that way, but it is the term that I've been hearing them using, is they refer to the generation as being lazy, that they don't have the same dedication to the work as they did in their generation. So they look at themselves and how they did things. On the flip side, I hear different things when I talk to my students. And what I hear more along the lines is not laziness, but I hear passion. I
Mm.
hear, very philanthropically driven individuals who don't want to just work for a Fortune 500 company as a cog in the wheel. They want to go out into the world and they want to make massive amounts of change in the world. They want to do good. They want to help address the UN SDGs. And so I feel that, there's a lot of misunderstanding between the generations, but that also doesn't help get over that hump of helping these individuals get jobs. And the current workforce, the current students going into the workforce are very much struggling trying to get employment right now.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of things you said that we could probably talk about that one
I
question the whole
know,
time.
right?
Um, so the lazy one's one of my most favorite to tackle. So
Mhm.
I'll tackle that one first. Every generation has been called lazy. You look at silent generation, who they worked in a lot of times munitions factory or sewing uniforms for the world wars, and then after that they were working for Main Street jobs or they're working on an assembly line. That's what they did. And so when their kids, the baby boomers, and again generalizing here and going very quickly through U.S. history, but when their kids, the baby boomers, went off to an air conditioned job, they were lazy because
Right.
they didn't have to sweat in non-air conditioned assembly lines. They weren't getting calluses on their hands. So boomers were lazy. Well, by the time Gen X graduated, Gen X had these things called typewriters, even electric typewriters, and the later born Gen X had early computers. So no longer were they writing and calculating by hand, they were letting a machine do it for them. Then enter millennials, they bring their machine in their pocket with their phone. And now you have Gen Z, who's continued on and actually has not become, I wouldn't say more lazy than the millennials, but they move faster because they are technology native, whereas millennials weren't. Technology came as millennials came of age. But Gen Z is the first tech native generation. and they have access to AI. What's interesting, I wrote an article that got published a couple weeks ago. This class of 2026 is one of the college class of 2026 is one of the most interesting. They were born the same year that Facebook was born. They started college the same year ChatGPT became available and free. So if you just look at that life, and there's a lot more data I put in there, but if you just look at that, that really changes the dynamic of a generation. So I think that's part of it. And then the final piece that you brought up, and I think this is just so powerful, um, is that millennials and Gen Z are the only two generations, and now Gen Alpha and Gen Beta, to be born with a label already put on them.
Yep.
Every generation was labeled after they
Mhm.
were born and years after they were into teenage years or adulthood. And there's a danger there. And yes, I know I study and work with generations, and that's my main focus. But at the same time, I often condemn the fact that we've started from day one labeling.
Yes.
My predictions for 2026 included Gen Beta predictions. They were born on January 1st of this year. We don't know, and so we're automatically assigning them to these categories, and it makes it easier in the workplace or in media, which is where we see a lot of it, to just group everyone together, and that's just not who we are as individuals.
Right, right.
I was wondering, like, if you think like these labels have like unconsciously, like shaped the generations, just like the Gen Z situation that you talked about.
I think it happens both ways. I think obviously if we're labeled, and we can see this time and time again, there's some level of self-fulfilling prophecy. If we believe something about ourselves, we're going to make that come true. So absolutely. I think the bigger danger is actually with the more mature generations writing off younger generations because Gen Z is lazy, Gen Z is entitled, or whatever label you want to stick on it. And when you start sticking that on there, any kid, and I'm doing air quotes for those just listening, but any kid that walks through the corporate office door all of a sudden fits this label. And that's just so untrue. It's untrue, and it has always been untrue. But Dr. Heidi, you asked a minute ago about passion. And what's
Mhm.
interesting is both millennials and Gen Z have a higher desire to work for something bigger than themselves than anyone else. But if you strip out, a lot of studies were done after the pandemic to see why do people actually work, why do people not want to work. The number one thing across all generations was because they wanted to have a purpose in their work. All generations. Number one reason after you took money away,
Yeah.
big caveat, um, which is really telling. And then they wanted to be part of a corporate culture that made them feel like they belonged or were in community. So if those are the top two things, that means the generations aren't that different when it comes to what motivates them to work. The question is, how do you communicate that effectively for each different generation?
Yeah, I mean, and that is a challenge. I mean, I I keep talking to them about it. I keep talking to the employers about it, but it's you can talk to one bubble and you
Yep.
make a little difference there, and your hope is that eventually those bubbles will then talk to other bubbles and it'll start to grow. But it's hard to get the word out there. It's hard to change mindsets that are so driven and so entrenched in one thought process. And it does concern me about what the future is going to be for employment. Also concerns me what the future is going to be for employment, just with AI being the driving force for the current generation that's
Hmm.
growing up in it. It's not like they were literally born into it. They were born into having computers in their hand. My daughter is in kindergarten, has a laptop.
Yep.
That's just mind boggling to me as I think about when I got a laptop. I don't think that came before college or anything like that. And even then, I don't think it was a laptop. I think it was still my desktop with a floppy drive.
Right.
But they're being, and if they do, and if you say as a parent, oh, I'm going to keep them off of it, I'm not going to let them use it, then they fall behind in school. And so I do try to find that balance between, okay, we're going to use some electronics. Now we're going to turn it off and we're going to, do it pen and paper, and we're going to do this. But to say you can't use it, they're going to fall behind and they're not going to be there. But then it concerns me about what's the job workforce going to look like, and are these kids going to be prepared? Because the jobs of the future that I personally see in my research has shown are all going to be STEM based employment. And if we're looking even at that deeper, we still have a big gap between genders in that field, and that's a more male dominated field. Even though we've gotten a lot more women working in STEM, we don't have it to the magnitude to be able to employ an entire workforce in that particular area.
Yeah. I think a lot of that's true. And I think there's so much legislation right now coming
Mhm.
out around cell phones in schools, cell phone usage, social media usage. 32 states as of right now, and soon it will be more than that, have put in some rules, whether that's school bus bans, in school ban, I mean, different levels. But
Mhm.
I think what we're starting to realize in a lot of the research is that this dependency on technology has limited the opportunities, quite frankly, that individuals can have. There are so many great researchers out there, so many great writers out there that talk about the importance of getting out and playing. And we've taken that away from schools. We've given them screens and all of that. So I think, each generation, one of my big frameworks is the generational pendulum. So you basically look over history, and a generation first experiences something like we do at all, and then after they experience it, they challenge it. We don't like what our parents said, so we're going to challenge it. Then at some point we overcorrect. It's like driving. We're driving down the road, and when you get your license for the first time and you're in the car and that deer hops out, you're going to go way out of the road. You're not going to handle that gracefully most times. So we overcorrect, and at some point we have to recalibrate, and we keep going. And I think we've seen that with the generations, and now we're starting to see I would say maybe moving to an overcorrection with screens and taking them away and stifling privileges. So we'll see how far that goes. Some countries have really stifled it. But you're seeing that back and forth. And I think the one thing that won't change with the job market, and we have to remember this, is that human interaction is still going to be the greatest asset that you can have. Learning how to interact with other people. And people often ask, because my early startups in 2009, 10, 11 were all AI startups. So it's something I've been talking about for a very long time, and been involved in. And we wrote algorithms literally on whiteboards and napkins and computer papers. I found one the other day. It was awesome. Um, and I was not the one writing them. I'm not that smart, but the team would. And everyone's like, "Are you letting your kids use ChatGPT and stuff like that?" And I let my son, when he finished preschool, use ChatGPT to plan a whole trip. He had a budget and everything, and it was great. And then I thought to myself, I said, wait a minute. He could have easily talked to any other human being that had been there before and gotten the same information. It would have taken a tremendous amount of effort and time, but he could have gotten the same thing, and he was capable, had the same level of capability as he did to prompt, any sort of LLM. So we've actually, as of right now, come back in here and ask, but we don't let our kids touch anything artificial intelligence based. We'd rather them have that conversation, go back, because if they can figure out how to get that information, that same logic that you use is the same logic that people are now copying and pasting other people's prompts, because they aren't even willing to think about how to prompt something properly. And
Exactly.
and that hasn't changed. And I think those human skills are so critical.
Yeah. And as a professor, I have the two little people sitting on my shoulder talking to
Yeah.
one another, one going, absolutely do not use it. On the other side, I'm like, this is so cool. We got to research it more.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really about I want still people to learn how to learn and how to communicate and how to be innovative on their own, but then be able to use this as a tool for efficiency and help develop their thoughts even further. But when you're not giving yourself that opportunity to learn and you're letting something else learn for you, there's no way to validate. There's no way to check the validity of the information that you're seeing to be able to know if it's accurate. We had a guest on the other day who was using the AI tool on Facebook. A little magnifying glass popped up and he was curious and he clicked on it and it told him all about himself. But it said that he graduated from the University of Iowa. And he goes, it was so cool because everything was accurate but that.
Yep.
But everybody else looking at that, they wouldn't be able to validate that, right? If they didn't do the research and actually know the person and know if that was true about them. So people are going to start walking around with misinformation. And that's my fear, is that we're going to be working in a world of what do we trust when we look at information coming at us?
I think trust is one of the big words, and it's really interesting. Somewhere in the AI sphere, data on me got leaked that I have 3 sons, which is not true. I do have 3 kids, but 2 sons
Yeah.
and 1 daughter. And I have been on podcasts recently, news clips, and even stages where people will rewrite my bio with AI, and that has continually come up as it's not on my. I don't know where it came from, but it is a lie proliferated by AI. And it's interesting you bring up trust, because I think that is the underlying core concept in leadership and management across the board, and human relationships. One of my favorite books is Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Oh, love it.
And the bottom of that is trust. And if you don't have trust, forget everything else. And I think that's not just true in the workplace, but that's absolutely everywhere. And I think each generation looks at trust differently. And I think that's where the communication breaks down. boomers, they always wanted stability. They grew up in a world where their parents drilled into their head, you need to save, you need to have stability. But boomers also wanted a stable job. That's why they would be the first ones in and last ones out, because they wanted to climb that corporate ladder. Then you move to Gen X, and theirs is all about skepticism and questioning, because they grew up when the government wasn't doing what most people thought the government should do. We saw scandals like Watergate, the energy crisis in these formative years of Gen X. So they were skeptical. And then you see the shift with millennials who wanted transparency. They had unlimited access to information for the first time, starting with Ask Jeeves all the way up to
Oh, yeah.
LLMs and everything in between. And I do miss Ask Jeeves a whole lot. But
I do too.
um,
Fun.
you have all of these things saying, hey, give me more information and then I can trust. But
Mhm.
then Gen Z took it to a whole new level. And it was no longer about information, it was about authenticity. And it was, I want your information, but I'm tired of the millennials' fake news and everything that created polarization. Give me real stuff or don't give me anything at all. So, yes, I want to see you without your makeup on TikTok. Yes, I want to see your kids on a bad day and what you're doing, not just your perfect vacations. Yes, I want to see when things go bad. And, that's where we get some of this conflict in the workplace, because Gen Z is not always going to come into the workplace smiling. If they're having a bad day, they're going to let you know it. There's no more dropping your baggage at the door. It comes right into the workplace. And I've written a lot about that because employers can't seem to work through that human side of being a human being. And yes, there's a professionalism element, and Gen Z will grow into that, just like every other generation had to grow into learning how to be in, corporate America, or even working at your local coffee shop or whatever it might be. So
Mhm.
I think trust, though, and how we perceive trust and how we receive trust is so different in every generation. And if we can't stop to understand how other people trust, it's going to be conflict in the workplace for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I see that, looking even at my classes for the last 18 years, the students that I started with 18 years ago never would have considered skipping class, even if they were coming in sick, and I would have had to like kick them out of the classroom. But skipping class was never an option. Like, I'm here, I'm learning, all the way up to today, when I could end up with a class, I could have a class of 38 students. I could walk in and I could have like 8 students in the room. And that's like the norm. Oh, I just didn't feel like coming today, or this or that.
Yeah.
Or I decided to, go do this instead. And I mean, they're very open and honest about what they're doing and why
Sure.
they're skipping your class. But it's like, there's no level of accountability for them anymore. And then they get surprised at the end of the term when their participation grade is not where they wanted it to be. And I'm like, well, you weren't here to participate. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a real issue. You've got the authority component,
Yeah.
which is really significant, because you look starting with millennial generations, and I often use the example. It's not super scientific, but it illustrates the point. It basically, when you look at millennials starting school, there was maybe one school counselor or guidance counselor, if any. By the time the last millennial graduated, they had one for the first 5 letters of the alphabet, the next 5 letters of the alphabet, and so on. And we started to see teachers move from being called coach to coach first name, or just first name. Their counselors were now their first name pals. And a large part of that is because we saw this idea of parents, mainly Gen Xers, parents of millennials, wanting to be their friends. And a lot happened in the millennials growing up years that was really tragic on American soil and in schools. And because of all of that, the tendency was to bubble wrap these kids and have conversations and ask, how did it make you feel? Whereas before, Gen X's parents would have never asked them that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have bothered. And so I think that's one part of it, is this authority has slipped away. And the other part is social media. You can just go slide into the DMs of anybody you want to talk to,
Right.
whether that's the president of the United States, or someone, a celebrity, or whomever it is. There's no calling an operator, having to work your way through a secretary, which you're not even allowed to say anymore, right? There's no more of this trying to have this hierarchy, and we've kind of flattened the world, which there's a ton of benefits to that. But that respect and authority barrier has also gone away. Plus, the last 2 generations have not been disciplined like the previous generations. I'm not saying we should go back to an authoritarian, extreme level of parenting, but at the same time, when you remove all discipline, even just boundaries, you have Gen Z in particular trying to create their own boundaries with separating from a family, estrangement, really growing in numbers. It's not that there's new family dynamics that are just being created in the last 10 years, but how we handle them is becoming more and more. we're really drawing these lines, and a lot of that has to do with, you can trace it all the way back to a lack of just that authority structure and that lack of discipline, and that hasn't really been as present in the last 2 generations as it was prior.
Yeah. And the research shows that we can't thrive without boundaries. As
Yeah.
much as we say as human beings, we want to do what we want to do. We want to have boundaryless things and we just want to do. We can't function in that. We become completely dysfunctional. So we may widen our boundaries. We might change the definition of those boundaries a bit, but without boundaries or guardrails, as some people like to even refer to them as being there, it's what keeps us kind of in place. It keeps us from deviating too far from one extreme to another. And we have to have it to be able to thrive and be able to be functional.
We do. And a lot of people now are looking to social media for those boundaries. They're looking for their help and where they're going. They're looking for it as the guardrails of where they shouldn't go because of, social exposure, which we're seeing a tremendous issue right now of people not willing to do certain things. I was working with a university not too long ago, and they're talking about how partying is down on campus. And I said, why do you think that is? They're like, oh, we don't think we know. They're so afraid of getting pictures posted online of them doing something they're not supposed to and getting shamed.
Yep.
And that's just a new level that no generation has really had to face before. If you got in the newspaper for doing something, you probably deserved it. And that's, now anyone can appear online and go viral overnight. And it's put some boundaries on that are probably not healthy boundaries.
Right. Diana, I think you made a game for Ryan, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
Would you like to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
So the name of the game is called Future or Fiction. So we'll
Okay.
basically give a scenario, and you basically have to quickly say whether would if you think it's gonna happen in the future or not.
Okay. I'm ready.
Dr. Heidi, do you want to start or?
No, you can do it. Go ahead.
Okay. My first one is AI managers replacing the middle management.
I would say fiction.
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to say future.
Okay.
And you want to hear a case study of why?
Yeah.
So JP Morgan Chase is one company that's already doing it. There's a company in China. They have already started moving AI robots into their hierarchy and putting them right into their senior leadership team. And they made of one of their subsidiaries, they made a AI robot, the CEO of their subsidiary. So we'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah.
But they're trying it.
People are definitely putting it in. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's going to happen a lot.
Or not is a whole different thing.
Yeah, I think it'll ultimately fail. I mean, we saw the same thing with assembly lines, and we removed people and you had to put them back in. So I think there's still a human element because humans only want to work for humans.
Well, I mean, think about that psychologically too. You have 5 people on your team and you look at the hierarchy and you're like 4 people in a robot and you're like, I'm the equivalent of a robot? Are they paying the robot? Am I not? Like, that leads to so many questions. And honestly, I would be insulted if all of a sudden I was like, they think the robot can work as good as me, man. All right. Well, that sucks.
Yep.
Well, one of my concern, when I come up with this, is that if we're using management, if we're using AI in management, then wouldn't that be a kind of surveillance? I mean, from a higher authority, but just it was replaced from the government to I would say companies or just in general.
Yeah, I think there's so many implications, and we could spend 2 hours on the ethics of who controls that, who programs that. At some point, and even as we're talking about agentic, AI and all that, the reality is someone's still putting all this information in. And all it's doing is scanning really, really fast and reading information fast and creating a decision to present something based on something it's been told to do. And I'm not saying it can't be used for nefarious things or can't learn a little bit, but at the end of the day, humans have still put it all in place. And I think there's always going to be humans involved at some point. And there will be people that try to remove it. There'll be communities and societies and companies that try to remove it, and they won't last, I don't think. Not saying that they won't try and get some efficiencies, but at the end of the day, human beings want to interact with other human beings. And that's why we've seen loneliness declared a national health epidemic by the Surgeon General in 2023 and renewed again last year. And I think we forget that a lot, that there's still something important about being human that nothing else has.
Right.
So the next one I have is 4-day work weeks becoming standard.
Future.
Mm.
Degrees becoming less important than portfolios.
Future.
Future.
And I'm a professor, but yeah. Yes.
Higher education has to really think carefully.
I completely agree. They got
Yeah.
to shift and shimmy and bring those prices down too.
There's a lot. Another
Yeah.
conversation.
I know, right? That's a whole other bag.
Well, as a high school student, this is one of like my biggest concerns, just because like how, get to like a good college is such like a big, I would say it's not like that big in your life, but like it's portrayed to us as like a really big thing,
Mhm.
like in your life. So I was just wondering that like is it a good thing or a bad thing? Like if degrees are becoming like less important than like portfolios.
I think college is so important. I really do. And I think you can succeed without ever going to college at the same time. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I think equally are important. My wife and I have this conversation a lot. If our kids decide not to go to college, we won't be upset. And both of us have, postgraduate or post undergraduate degrees. So, we have no problem with the education system and the higher education system and graduate system. I think there's something to be said, and some people can get this experience elsewhere, but not many, for the 4-year educational experience. The way they make you think, the way they put you with people that you haven't been put with, there's something different to that. And again, not saying you can't get those experiences elsewhere, but I think as higher education institutions consider reinventing, we're seeing student experiences increase, campuses being much more intentional about whole health. So looking at financial, spiritual well-being, and everything else. And I think those experiences are still important. And the degree is not a piece of paper that you get and hang up. The number of times that someone has asked for either my undergraduate or graduate degree, I can
Right?
count on one hand. In fact, I don't think anyone's ever asked for my graduate degree,
Yeah.
not once. And maybe like once or twice for my undergraduate degree, and they cost a lot of money. They were not cheap schools, and the reality is the experience there is what they're paying for. They can tell that I had a different experience because I had that paper. They don't care about the paper. They care about who I became because of the experience. And I think that's what students really need to think of. And I think some of those schools might not be the ones that you naturally inclined to go to. You got to look for those ones that are going to give you that experience, that are going to prepare you for the real life, but give you really good conversations on campus too.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Ryan on that one. And, being a professor, everyone says, well, why wouldn't you just push out? You naturally would push everyone to go to college. First of all, not everyone's made out of the same mold. Not everybody's going to
Yep.
succeed as well in college. And there are so many alternative paths to getting an education. I think everybody should be skilled in something and learn a skill.
Mhm.
How they go about doing that, it doesn't matter to me how that gets done. Is there value in a 4-year education? Yes, but it goes way beyond a classroom. It goes way beyond the textbook. It's more about networking. It's more about getting to know people. It's learning how to learn, how to communicate. It's trying to figure out who you are as a person early on in your 20s. Before you really go out into the workplace, and kind of doing some internships and testing the water and getting to see things. So I think there is value. What's that going to look like over the next 10, 15 years as this continues to evolve? I don't think anybody really fully knows yet, but it's going to have to adapt a little bit. One thing I will say is some of the major companies, Google, Coca-Cola, Amazon, and there were, I think, at least 2 other big ones that were doing it. They've started building in-house universities. And so they have a learning and development department now, and they're bringing professors over to build out their curriculums. And so they're finding it cheaper to build that and then upskill their current employees. So that way they don't, because they were spending so much money trying to provide that training. And secondarily, they were thinking, why not just bring high performing students right from high school into their positions, and we give them the specific training that they need for the job right here on the job. So that's what some of them are doing. Again, it's a model. They're testing it. It's going to take a while for anything like that to take hold, but that's another innovative way to think about education. And, there's nothing wrong with going down a path like that either.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one I have is actually really interesting. It's teenagers building billion-dollar AI companies.
Both? Can I say both?
Yeah.
I mean, I just wrote a piece on Justin Bieber, and I never read in pop culture. And it was basically saying that he was the millennial dream. If you look at it, his age, he got discovered on YouTube, and that's what we're seeing right now. There are going to be people, absolutely, and so if it is the future with some people building some AI companies, and you will see a lot more effective solopreneurs that are able to build larger team or larger virtual teams with agents and AI agents, things like that. But that's not going to be everybody. Just like not everyone's a movie star, not everyone's an athlete. You're going to have, I would assume, pretty close to the same numbers as far as those breakout billionaires because of it.
Next one we have is human employees working alongside AI coworkers daily. I think it's already
Oh,
happening.
future. Yeah, future.
Go to
Oh,
Wendy's. It's already
yeah,
happening.
present. Yeah.
Companies hiring based on personality data.
Um, I think portfolio is probably more than personality. Personality is going to get into a lot of gray area with employment law and what you can and can't test depending on your state. Um, I think we're gonna have. I mean, you're looking. If you look at China, there's a whole city in China that's fully monitored and fully remote. They know every single thing that they buy, think. I mean, not really think, but literally think. They've every single door is calculated, and they will give people a not exactly a credit score, but effectively a social score based on how they interact with others, are they kind to others. And I do think if we continue to move into this surveillance capitalism mindset, we're going to see a lot of companies or even governments try that, and it's very dystopian if you look at the ramifications of that. Not that it's not going to happen; it will happen. It's already happening, but I think there's some big dangers in that.
We're already doing it, Ryan. It's definitely not to the scale what you were describing,
Yeah.
but I mean, HR managers are already going on your social media accounts. They've already looked you up. They're
Yep.
analyzing what you're doing. What were you doing on Friday night? How do you present yourself? Do you seem to have good moral character? And they are already making decisions just based on that, whether they either want to bring you in for an interview or will even consider giving you a job offer, because they feel that your personal life is also a reflection on the morals and values of that particular company.
Yep.
So in that essence, it's not to the same extreme, but it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's been I mean, that was the millennial. I remember going to the workforce, scrub your social media, shut it down, lock it down, and we had whole courses on how you lock it from employers. So it's absolutely happening. I don't know if it's straight up personality tests as much as like behavioral analysis is already happening for sure, and probably will continue to happen. And again, technology is making it really easy to get all that information, but technology is also wrong. You look at all the incredible candidates for jobs that are getting overlooked by applicant tracking systems because AI is just filtering in very ineffective ways. And a lot of HR companies, they're not, or HR managers don't care. They want their job to be easier. And so they're letting all of those great resumes get thrown aside and might not be getting the best candidate.
And think about how often or how unoften, that's not even a word, Heidi.
I like it.
I know that we have not revamped the recruiting system. We've updated it with technology, but we post a job, we get a resume. We post a job, we get a resume. We live in 2026.
Yeah.
This is the best we can do for determining recruitment for positions. I'm just saying, I think we could do better by now.
I think the portfolio is such a powerful tool, and I know
Mhm.
some colleges are moving to that. I know some middle and high school students or schools are moving towards that. I think that's where we were for the longest time.
Yeah.
You went down. Think about the 30s, 40s, and 50s. You went down to the bank because they knew your family, they trusted you, they
Mhm.
saw the business and the work that you've done, and you made good shoes, and your shoes were always high quality, so they were going to give you a loan to buy the new, whatever it was.
Mhm.
I think we're seeing a swing, especially once Gen Alpha comes into the workforce of this almost elevated trust with human relationships. I hope
Yeah.
if the pendulum swings the way it's going, I think we will see that and continue distrust. What's interesting, the number one cohort who distrusts AI is Gen Z.
Mhm.
they distrust it more than any other cohort. They use it more than almost any other cohorts. Millennials slightly outuse them in the professional setting, but it's fascinating. So it's this love-hate relationship. And I think we're way off from the future of fiction, but I think that was important to add there.
Yeah.
The last one I have is traditional resumes disappearing.
Oh,
gonna
future. Yep, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, that's all I have for the game.
That was fun. Thanks for putting that together.
Oh gosh. So Ryan, if you had one piece of advice to leave our high school students with today, what would that advice be for them?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Heidi. I think there are kind of two rolled into one, if you will. I think the first part of it is know where you're going. I'll give you a quick example. My son, kids don't always do what you want for some reason, but when you turn into a race or a game, sometimes they'll do it. And one night he wasn't going to bed, and so I told him I'd race him upstairs, and so he started running up our stairs, and he kept looking over his shoulder. So I saw a parenting opportunity. I ran right past him, ran into his room, and sat on the edge of his bed. And he stomped in there, all upset. Why did you win? And I said, buddy, you were so focused on looking over your shoulder at where I was, you forgot where you were going. And I think for high schoolers, you are in a world of distraction like no other generation. Your parents don't even get it. And that's not a slight on your parents. That's just the reality. You have more noise, more information flowing in your fingertips, quite literally, than any other generation has experienced. And if you don't know where you're going, and that doesn't have to be, a certain bank account number or, a certain job title, but what's important to you? What are your core values and all of that? If you don't know that, the next alert on your phone is going to sidetrack you. It's like looking over your shoulder. So I would say that's the first thing. And then in order to be able to keep that in line, and I think this is probably even more important, there's three people I always keep in my life. One are mentors, people that are ahead of me on this race, people that have already fallen into the pothole and can point it out so I don't fall into that same pothole. But the second one, and this is hard, but with how authentic Gen Z loves being, they should find this a little bit easier. Find a running mate. And I've talked to the same people, about two people, for it'll be almost 20 years now, every single week. And they know everything about me, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the stuff that never makes it to a podcast interview. And they can ask me about those things. And so when I'm falling down, they can pick me up. And when they're falling down, I can pick them up. And having that camaraderie, that running mate is huge. And then the final and third person is people that are a few steps behind. When you have the opportunity to talk to someone that's coming down the same road that you've already traveled, when you take the time to teach them, and you can even see this in siblings, a kindergartner teaching a preschooler in a house, they start to learn and actually internalize the lessons that they've learned by teaching someone younger. And I think those three people are important. So if you know where you're going and you have three people that keep you on that track, you're bound to be successful.
That's amazing advice. And you were talking about racing your son, and it made me think of a story with my daughter last week at swimming. She was doing the exact same thing. She was getting ahead of everybody, and instead of just playing her game and doing her thing, she wanted to know where she was. So she kept looking back. But what I noticed was once she felt she was comfortably enough ahead, she slowed up. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good life lesson right now.
Yeah.
And so she slowed up, and then next thing she knew, somebody caught up to her, and then she really had to struggle to get going again. And they beat her it was only by like a second, but she didn't understand because she was like, I was so far ahead. And so I had to talk with her afterwards. I'm like, you never look back. I said, you pick your path and you go and you keep going as fast as you can go forward. And I said, you don't look back at anybody else. You don't slow up when you think you're in the lead. Cause I said, that's when someone's going to catch up to you. And, it hit her home. She was like, I don't understand.
It's real. It's real. And it's so easy to get distracted.
It absolutely is. Well, thank you, Ryan. We really do appreciate your time today. This was a wonderful conversation. We thoroughly enjoyed it. But we don't want to take up any more of your time, but we definitely do appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Ryan.